Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, March 26th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. The California Victim Compensation Board is meant to help those impacted by crime, but some are calling for reforms from the state agency.
I think they need to be more flexible with what they allow funding for, and they need to move more to a model of funding upfront rather than reimbursement.
We will learn more about the state program, but first, these news headlines. 2 children in Fresno County have died from the flu and the respiratory virus known as RSV. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado has these details.
These 2 deaths among children are the first for Fresno County as the flu season continues. Statewide, 24 children have died from the viruses, and it has taken a heavier toll on those over 65, with over 1,000 deaths recorded this season. That has made this flu season already one of the deadliest in California in years, and health officials say they are seeing lower vaccination rates this season compared to past. The flu kills thousands of people each year across the country, but health officials say it's not too late to get vaccinated. People over 65 or those under 5 are encouraged to get their vaccine. That includes people who are pregnant or who have underlying illnesses. RSV vaccines are also available for the elderly and the very young. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
The National Park Service is leading an investigation into the death of a woman after she was found injured in Yosemite National Park. Authorities tell the LA Times the woman was found injured last week and was later taken to a Fresno County hospital. She died the next day. Park authorities say the woman's injuries appeared suspicious but have not revealed other details. An investigation is still ongoing. A federal program that's become a lifeline for rural communities in California is expected to stop sending payments next month. Carolyn Jones with our California newsroom partner, CalMatters, explains.
For more than a century, Congress has given extra money to counties with large tracts of federal land. The idea is that since this land cannot be taxed, the money can help offset the loss of revenue. The program, known as the Secure Rural Schools Act, would have brought in more than $30 million to California counties to help pay for schools, roads, and other critical services. But Congress did not include the program in the budget passed earlier this month, and it's unlikely it will be added now. One superintendent told me that the Rural Schools Program is, quote, budget dust for Congress, but for a lot of California's rural communities, the money is a lifeline. For many rural school districts, the loss of funding will mean staff layoffs, cuts to after-school programs, and delayed building repairs. As of now, Secure Rural Schools payments to counties are expected to end in April.
That was CalMatters education reporter Carolyn Jones. Monday, March 31st is Transgender Day of Visibility in California. The state Senate has passed a resolution marking the occasion. It comes a few months after President Trump's executive order saying the government would recognize only 2 sexes, female and male. San Diego Democratic Senator Steve Padilla co-authored the Transgender Day of Visibility resolution. Padilla says he's a proud sibling of a trans woman who had a difficult adolescence before transitioning.
She's professionally successful, happily married, and happier than she ever was growing up. And I love her unconditionally. And the idea that in this country, in the 21st century, we would even be having this conversation is disgusting and abhorrent to me.
Organizers of Transgender Day of Visibility say California's support of the trans community is needed even more in the face of rising hostility.
Raise a glass with KVPR, Sunday afternoon, May 4th, for KVPR's wine tasting and more, featuring fine wines from California and beyond, local craft beer, delicious food, live music, and a silent auction, all on the amazing grounds of the Lester Estate in Fresno, where Van Ness Extension meets the San Joaquin River. All proceeds benefit KVPR, so purchase your tickets today at kvpr.org/wine.
And now to our main story. Victims of some crimes are eligible to receive money from the state after suffering harm. The exact amount is determined by a state agency known as the California Victim Compensation Board. A recent report from our news partner CalMatters found the agency is struggling. It is not reviewing claims fast enough to keep up with victims' needs. It's not holding evidentiary hearings in person as required. And recently, the agency requested an additional $4 million to speed up its appeals process. That's because the number of victims filing appeals after their claims were denied has increased by nearly 200% since 2019. To better understand how victim compensation works in California, we spoke with Gena Castro Rodriguez. She's a professor of counseling psychology at the University of San Francisco and has worked with crime survivors for more than 10 years, including leading victim services for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. Gena explains what exactly the California Victim Compensation Board does.
The Compensation Board in California was created to distribute, among other things, it has other roles, but one of its primary roles is to distribute dollars that comes from fines and fees and some from the budget to crime survivors to help them recover after being a crime victim. So it's meant to help some of the things that are affected when you become a crime survivor.
And victims who could be awarded funds from the state, are these victims who've survived a crime? Could it be families of victims who were killed by a violent crime? Could you elaborate on who would qualify for this funding?
Yes, there's actually three groups. So there's direct victims. They've been the person that has been robbed or assaulted, shot. There are indirect victims, which could be the family members of someone who lost a family member to homicide. And then there's also collateral victims, and that could be people that were affected by the crime. Particularly, we care about children who witness violence or sustain a big loss, like they lost a family member or a family member has been incapacitated or severely harmed from the crime that they experienced.
And just a few years ago, you authored a report called Survivor Voices. Part of your research looked at the California Victim Compensation Board. What did you find?
So we've known for a long time that the compensation fund has some challenges in being accessible to survivors and also responding to the kinds of things that survivors need. So the system was set up a very long time ago, and it was really sort of best suited for a survivor who was well put together, had resources, and was looking to be compensated for things that they spent out of pocket. So they would go to the hospital, they would have medical bills, they would be able to pay those, and then later apply to victims' compensation and hope to be reimbursed for some of those expenses. But what we know about victimization and crime is that there are those survivors that are well put together and that, can support themselves through something like this, even though it can be horrific, even though it can be really difficult. And then there are lots of survivors who can't sustain being a victim because they are living closer to the edge. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They are working multiple jobs. They don't have benefits like insurance or time off or workman's comp or those kinds of other resources that can help them when they sustain physical and emotional trauma from being a crime victim. And for those people, victims' compensation doesn't work very well. So they don't have the money to pay up front and wait to be reimbursed. They don't often have the capacity to go through lengthy application processes to try to be reimbursed. And then if they're denied, go through an appeals process. They're just trying to put their life back together because they don't want to lose their house. They need to go back to work. They need to take care of their children.
Yeah, crime does not discriminate. So certainly something to think about. Now, your research found that of people who were denied claims, so they'd filed a claim with this board, 70% of people surveyed who were denied said they did not know why. Why wasn't the board giving them a reason?
I don't know why. I'm not sure if it's they're not communicating to the survivor directly about, what the reason that they were denied. Maybe the survivor no longer was looking into this because it had been so long. They just weren't following up on it anymore. I don't know. We didn't get to the heart of why. It was just such an important fact that we knew that 70% of them just didn't qualify for this and had to move on with their life. And they should have qualified for these resources.
In your study, you refer to the compensation board system as resembling a, quote, insurance agency model. That was in a report by our news partner, CalMatters. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that and how it affects these victims who are seeking compensation?
So the California Victims Compensation Board is run by regulations and laws that guide the dollars that are given out to survivors. And if you look at their staffing, there are a lot of people on their legal team who are interpreting the statutes and the regulations and laws that are associated with giving out compensation. And so the people that are evaluating whether or not an application is approved are using that lens to decide if someone is going to get compensation. So they're looking at compliance with statutes and regulations rather than the whole picture. What happened to this person? What happened to this family? Why might they need these dollars? Why might they have, contributed to the crime in some way that it looks like they've contributed to it, but really they were part of something violent that happened. So I'll give you an example. We would have a client years ago. We had a client years ago that was jaywalking, had walked in the middle of the street, was hit by someone who was a drunk driver. And we filed a claim so that they could get compensation. They lived, they survived. We wanted some medical compensation and some therapy for the person. And they were denied because jaywalking at that time was illegal and they were contributing to their crime. So yes, the person was walking in the street, but a drunk driver hit them and they were still a victim of a crime. And they shouldn't be responsible for that victimization. Were anyone else to be driving, that wouldn't have happened to them. And so that's where we see the difference between understanding what's happening to a survivor and interpreting the law or the regulation, not matching up.
I wanted to circle back to a comment you made about the process not favoring people with lack of resources. What logistically could change, in your opinion, to improve that process?
Yeah, I think they need to be more flexible with what they allow funding for, and they need to move more to a model of funding upfront rather than reimbursement. So there's a pilot right now that advocates can apply for resources to give small amounts of money to survivors immediately. So things like, $100 grocery card for Safeway so that they can buy groceries, money to change the locks on their door if they were robbed, a hotel night if they, are escaping violence in their home. Those kinds of resources are invaluable and they're so small. They're such a small percentage of the entire fund, but they really make meaningful change right away. We need more of that and less of a complicated process that requires applying and appealing and waiting a year to, receive any kind of reimbursement for their expenses. By that time, the average survivor has gone back to work, has gone back to taking care of their family, has had to move forward, even though they haven't healed, even though they haven't recovered. And then that affects them, their family, their community moving forward because they never heal and, get better.
As I mentioned, our news partner, CalMatters, has been covering this. They spoke with someone named Ruby Marichalar. Her son was killed in 2012, and she was seeking funds for her son's funeral. She was denied twice by the board without being offered an in-person hearing. Would you say a lack of in-person hearings impacts how these cases are decided?
I think so, because they're not getting any context for what has happened or how it's affected the survivor. Instead, again, they're just using those regulations and rules. They're very black and white. Did you meet the criteria or did you not meet the criteria? And I think that this work has to have more of a personal lens on it to see how it's affecting the person. And really, very small amounts of dollars could help people recover and do better. And those investments not just help that individual, but it helps their family, their community. It helps all of us be safer. When someone is a victim of crime, they're at huge risk for being a victim of crime again or committing violence themselves. So when we help people get better, we're actually trying to prevent future violence. And if we can do that for $150 for a food card or a hotel room or, a couple of $1,000s to put towards a funeral, we help that family get better and focus on healing and recovery rather than doing things that we've seen survivors have to do, like have car washes or food sales in order to bury their loved ones that died by no fault of their own.
That was my conversation with Gena Castro Rodriguez. She's a professor at the University of San Francisco with more than a decade of experience working with crime survivors. According to CalMatters, last August, a judge ruled that the California Victim Compensation Board must offer in-person evidentiary hearings. Advocates hope this ruling will open the door for more people to receive funds after falling victim to crime. And that's today's show. Thank you for listening. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.